What's up, Moto buddies? Mike here at Taco Moto Co. Taco Tours. This bike right here is a 500 Exc-f, and as you can tell, this dude is not messing around. This is a serious homie, and he's been on a cross-country trip. This guy's from New Hampshire. Young guy, cool dude, Abe. He's a rad guy who set this bike up, and if you notice some similarities between RTW Paul's bike and this one, then that's because there's a lot of things on here that are modeled after Paul's bike. A lot of the things that he's done to this, that Abe's done to this, are really to sort of follow in line with the good work, good development work that Paul has done to set up the 500 Exc-f as, you know, this light adventure format. And I think the bike works really well for it. I've been out this morning on it doing some testing, and I think the balance of this is about as good as you can get for, you know, putting this kind of luggage and cargo on a bike of this size. This is really a big bike setup. So if you look at this and you think, well, why didn't this guy just go ahead and get I don't know, something like a KLR or bigger? That's because there's some advantages to using a lighter bike sort of out of format in a way. This bike clearly has with this level of gear, he's kind of at the limits of what I think, in my opinion anyway, that I think that you're going to want to do to one of these. But it still works. It still handles itself super well. Does great in the dirt. Not so good in the whoops. Have a little whoop section that I tested it out, and I've never ridden a bike that's set up to this extent on the whoops. And obviously with all the rear weight, the back end is pretty unstable for the whoops, for high-speed whoops. So you're just gonna have to roll those. It's what was really nice is in a seating position how smooth and plush the back end is, though, when you're taking some of the smaller stuff. And very stable on the high speed. Double track. It's got a stabilizer. It's got stabilizer on here, and so there's a lot going on with this bike that I think if you were setting a machine up to do some of this light ADV type of adventure work, this bike would work really well for you. So let's take a couple look at some of the things he's got going on here. Up on the front, he's got the Moto's Tractionator Rally. This is more of the it's probably 70-30 type of format tire, 70 road, 30 dirt, and for like BDR stuff, works really good. Bulletproof on the front rotor guard. His shocks are stock. I think he's resprung this. Obviously he has, as I think about it, for the weight. And you have to do that. That's absolutely essential. He's got a Baja Designs headlight, and that looks like that's the XL footprint. That's probably the XL Pro based on the size of the Cree LED lights in there. He's got a little Tusk fender bag, and I think he's got a spare tube in there. I'm not a big fan of carrying anything on the front, and the reason is I see these bounce off all the time. You have to cinch it down incredibly tight, which he's done, so he's done a good job there. It does block some of the downlight onto the trail, so I know guys use those. I don't, but he's done it, I think, to good effect. He's got up here on his cockpit, we since he's been here, since he's rolled into Vegas, we've done some things electrically, specifically, like we've got the Moto Minded dash that's now in there, and the key relocator, and then it's got this nice little USB charger, and it's a on and off, so you're not going to drain your battery down unless you leave that on. You know that these little USB chargers are basically like a power draw, and so if you leave that on, it'll continually draw power. We do have ways that we could wire that in so that it's only powered on key on, or engine run rather. And on this bike, he wanted to have it so he could have power all the time, and that's how we've got it set up. And then just in case his battery drains out, we threw on the Tokyo off-road starting capacitor, and so you can kick this bike and get it started. Even if you had a completely dead battery, or let's say even a stolen battery, you could start this bike and run it on the capacitor, which is a nice feature to have. He's got the Cycra Pro Bend bar guards. These are the Rally, the Pro Grip. I think these are the 617s. I'll put the part numbers of some of this stuff in the notes here. And then it's got the aux brake. Now this is the right hand, or the left hand rear brake. This is the cable actuated one. Let's take a look at that and see what's happening down here on the bottom. So at the master cylinder, there is a clamp and then a cable, a hard cable that goes down here. And this thing is basically piggybacks onto the clevis here for the rear brake. So if you hit the rear brake with your foot, you notice how the arm slides over the cable, so there's no activation there. It's only when you have positive pressure on the cable that it activates the rear brake. So some of the advantages of this over the aux hydraulic one are there's no lag with the activation of the hand lever. On the hydraulic one, what happens is when you press the brake here with your foot, you decompress the slave cylinder that's down here on the aux hydra, and then so to activate, if you activate it with the lever, you have to pump back in the preload that got taken away by the compression on the foot brake. And so there's some lag there. It often takes 1 or 2 pumps to pump the hydraulic one at the lever back up until you have full activation, full power. With this one, there is no latency. As soon as you press on the lever up there, then it activates the lever back here. So that's kind of a nice advantage. The disadvantage, the only disadvantage that I see with the aux cable, is you don't have as much power. There's no mechanical leverage. And so the lever with your hand does not apply enough braking to lock the rear tire up on the street, and it does have enough braking to lock it up on the dirt. And there is a little bit of fatigue that can come into play when you're using that left hand cable brake a lot because of its lack of power, the lack of torque in that. Now you'd have to have some sort of gear mechanism in the lever to give you some mechanical advantage. That's just overly complicated. So the only way you could get really strong actuation is if you had that, and that's not really practical or possible. So if you're needing more power, if you want more power, I happen to not use the aux brake cable. I prefer the hydraulic one. Now aux brake is coming out with a new version of the hydro. I don't know that it's out yet, but I've seen some releases on it and it looks promising. And then of course you have the Recluse left-hand brake lever, and that is probably the best. It's the most expensive as well, but it offers you, there's no latency, meaning you don't have to pump it once or twice to overcome the compressed slave cylinder effect like you do on the aux hydro. And the strength of it is incredible. It's really strong. It'll lock up on the street, no problem at all. So that's kind of a quick rundown on the 3 different versions of what's out there as far as rear brake products. This one I think works really good for our rider. He's a young guy, he's got a lot of hand strength. If you're an older guy or you have some compromised hand strength issues, you'll probably want the strongest one available, and that would be the Recluse. The aux hydro is kind of in the middle. And then the aux brake, this cable actuated one, would be sort of at the bottom end in terms of how much hand strength you need to activate it, and then what its ultimate strength is as far as activation of the rear brake. So going back up here on the top, we put on an Atlas throttle lock. These work great. Once you activate that, then it locks the throttle in any position. And there is not so much friction that you can't overcome that just by turning it. And then if you are in a locked open position, you just hit the little tab button there and then it releases. That's a really cool feature for the dual sport guys. Talked about the Scots. And then let's see, he's got this rock. What is this rock farm? I think this is a you know, the quad lock does a good job. Those guys are out of Australia and they have a nice little seat and click kind of a phone holder. And I think this is just another version of that. Over here is the Hondo Garage. This is called the Juice Squeezed, and this is my favorite phone holder because it has a pad charger. It's a wireless phone charger. So if your phone is compatible with that type of charging, then you just mount it in here, and then this is wired into the bike, and so you're constantly charging your phone wirelessly. I like that. That's a huge advantage. One of the things we've noticed over the years of having phones that we plug in is the fact that your plug on the phone eventually kind of wears itself out, vibrates itself out, and then you aren't able to charge anymore with the phone. Your cables, it seemed to go through a lot of cables. We tried all kinds of different variations and options on that, and I just never found anything that I liked or that worked really well until this one came along, the Juice Squeezed from Hondo. They also make a mount that is sort of like a little cable shock absorber type of system. This is the hard rigid one, it's very sturdy, and then they've got this little quad cable. It's like a stainless steel braided little deal, and it allows some flexibility here for maybe some crash protection, but also some vibration protection against like the camera. You guys will often lose the camera on their phones when they mount them up here onto the bars just because of the vibration and the shock. It seems to affect the camera in these newfangled phones, so that is a antidote to that. So he's got, as far as bags go, check it out, he's got full MOSKO. So this is the Rackless 80 back here, which he has on a rack, and I like the fact that the rack does a really great job of carrying all the weight, because as we've talked about before, the KTM 500s do not have any structural support past a couple inches beyond the seat. And so if you're going to load up a bike like this, you really need a rack, or else all of that weight is just going to be split between a little bit of the subframe and then hanging off the back, and it's you'll get some fender sag. So this is the True North rack. We've talked about the True North racks before. I think they're probably the best rack going out there. Dan does a great job on these, and MOSKO, Pete and Ashley, of course, have fantastic products, the best in the business. And so our guy Abe has become a big fan of MOSKO, and so he's flying the flag and running all their kit. I think he's got some tent poles here and just different things. These are all waterproof dry bags. These are like river rafting style dry bags, you know, where you fold over the top, and they're completely waterproof. In fact, absolutely everything on this bike is rainproof, and it's probably all submersible proof. If you were to do a river crossing with everything on the back end of this bike and get into the water, you'd be fine. I don't think you'd have anything inside would get wet at all. He's got some nice, this is obviously more of a visual deterrent than a true actual deterrent. So what this prevents is somebody from just doing a quick theft of some of your bags, and somebody more sophisticated would get past this and defeat this. But I think this is really a smart thing to do if you're just you know, gonna run into a store or something. And as far as that goes, he's got a nice cable lock here, and so he can secure his bike. And what I tell guys all the time who think that the key switch is a theft deterrent, it's absolutely not. I won't show you which wires you would jump together, but really quickly with a paper clip, I can defeat your key, I can overcome that, and then steal your bike. So the thought that the key is in fact a theft deterrent is just completely false. I think it's a visual deterrent. I think it fumbles up. That's not to say that you shouldn't have it on there, because I think what it does is it fumbles up some of those crackheads who could stick a screwdriver in there. Now, this is not a very sturdy mechanism, and so you could, you know, like any car, like a lot of cars anyway, maybe some of the older cars, if you could just physically overcome the tumblers in there, then you can turn that. So that's one way to quickly defeat that, but you can also do it electrically. So the punchline here is that that key is by no means a theft deterrent on this machine at all. You should treat your motorcycle like it's an expensive mountain bike. You know, think of all the ways that you would protect your bike if you went into someplace. Your bicycle, you should look at this as, you know, the same way as far as theft detection or prevention as you do with a bicycle. Lock it up with a cable, lock it through the frame, secure it to something that can't be cut or kicked over, something structural on a building, or another motorcycle. Locking two motorcycles together gets that done. So there's all kinds of ways you can do that, but you should really think about securing your bike when you go somewhere. And Abe obviously is doing a really good job of that, and so there's all kinds of avenues to make that happen. Let's take a look at the rear wheel here. We just threw on this rear tire. This is a Dunlop 606. I forget what he had on there before, but it was completely knackered, totally worn out. And so this is a nice, it's a desert tire. This is a long mileage, very hard tire. This is a tire that's really similar to like the Maxxis Desert IT. It doesn't provide, so it's kind of a numb feeling tire. It's not lively. It doesn't really tell you what's going on as far as its grip to the road. They tend to, when they let loose, when they break loose, they do it a little bit without warning. But that's sort of by design, I guess, in that because it's so hard and so it's set up for such long durability, you're going to get trade-offs. You can't have everything. If you have a soft, compliant tire that will give you a lot of rider feedback and communicate to you what its traction thresholds are, then you're going to lose durability. So you're just trading one thing for another. And for this bike, you could see what his goals are, and he doesn't. He needs mileage, and that's a good tire for that. 120 size, Bridgestone ultra heavy duty tube in there with slime. We balanced the wheels, and then we threw on the DDC. He had an aluminum sprocket on there. We kept the stock. Well, this actually, that's not entirely correct. The stock gearing on this bike, well, shoot, I have to look it up. It may have been 1448. Now on the 17 through 19s, it was not 1448 on the 500. They changed it to like 1545, but maybe it was 1448 on the stock bike. But that's what nonetheless, that's what we're running here. He did have an aluminum sprocket on there, which would not make the duration of the trip as he continued on. So we pulled that off, threw on this DDC steel sprocket, Warp 9, titanium bolts, and that's only for bling. Man, I love these bolts. They just look, they dress up the rear wheel. They set it off so well. I like that combination a ton. His chain slider was blown out, so we threw on the TM Design Works. This is the Baja slider, and then a Dirt Tricks counter sprocket dome washer. On there you can see he's got various guards, Enduro Engineering for the skid plate, and then he's got some of the Polysports here for the stator cover. We pulled out his stock plastic fuel filter and put in a metal version. We threw on some filter skins under the seat, under the air filter there. So he's just, you can see he's got the really big Cherubies tank. So I mean, there's just a lot of stuff on this bike, maybe too much to mention. We threw on the Moto fork wrap turn signals. And let me say one thing about that. These, because we wire them in for run light feature, are my favorite on these really big tanks, because all that light at night just comes out with the run light feature, and then it glows through the whole tank. So you just basically like create a cool light effect with those lights going into the tank, which I think is really rad. Recluse clutch, P3 carbon fiber guard on his exhaust. So that's kind of a wrap. Seat concept seat. I'll throw all the components and various things that he's put on this bike into the notes. So this is a great example of a guy who's doing the things. He took a leave of absence from his job, told him be gone for about 8 to 10 weeks while he traveled the country. And you know, here's something cool too. This rider who used RTW Paul's bike as sort of a benchmark got to meet Paul. Paul was at the taco shop for a couple of days ago, and Abe got to meet sort of his moto hero, and that was fantastic. It was great. And then maybe his other sort of moto hero would be possibly Pete from MOSKO, right, with all these bags. And then it just so happens that Pete's gonna be at the taco shop on Friday, and then going to Moab, and that's exactly where Abe is headed. So Pete is, or Ashley, blah, blah, blah. So Abe is gonna meet up with Pete and Ashley, who have graciously agreed to even have him come and join their little camp spot up there in Moab. So you've just got great people in the moto community who are very inspired to help each other and are very generous with their time and their resources, all helping each other out. You know, we're a family, we're a band of misfits, right? If this was the 1800s, we'd be cowboys and trappers and explorers, and we would have to rely on each other for you know, our safety and our survival. And so I think in a lot of ways that's what's happening in the moto community, especially this sort of long endurance adventure travel moto community, which a lot of us are a part of. And it resonates with us, that freedom, the independence of it. A lot of us are out there solo too, and that's something unique. There's other motorcycle disciplines, maybe Harleys and some of the Goldwing groups and some of those guys, the BMW guys. God bless everybody on two wheels. I think what's unique in certain aspects to the ADV guys, the adventure guys, and these light ADV guys, is a lot of us travel alone. And I think we do that because we're sort of misfits and renegades. We like the solitude of being out on our bike. We like the challenge of experiencing, you know, that kind of adventure and that intensity of travel by ourselves. I think it pushes us to, you know, dig deep and reach really far and see, you know, what our capacities are. And the fact that, again, we've got guys out there like Pete, Ashley, guys and gals, and RTW Paul, and many, many others. I mean, I've only named just a few here, but I could go on, countless other people who have that adventure spirit in and of themselves, but also are willing and so generous and to share their resources with other guys. I think Abe is the beneficiary of that, and there's just many, many others, countless others out there. So in the comments, if you could do a small favor for me, if you're an adventure travel, if you're somebody who is riding a lot of solo trips, maybe you're doing some Idaho stuff, some Tour of Idaho stuff. We've got Ironman guys out there all over the country. I talk to you guys all the time. You guys message me, you email me. I'm happy to help and support you as much as I can. And I'm even happy to have you guys drop by the taco shop like Abe did here, and we can help you continue to upfit your bike and make it even better. So in the comments, let me know what you've done as far as solo adventure travel, where you've been, where you're going, what you're prepping for, what some of the things are that you've done to your bike, and if there's anything at all that we can do at the taco shop to help you out, to lend a hand through Taco Moto. We're really excited and willing and happy to do that. So for real, you hear me say this every time, but this is a guy who's legit straight up going out and doing it, and that is go out and get some adventure.